family members, even the infants, and all his companions. 72 people were killed.
The Umayyads, who later became Sunni, continued to rule for another 70 years. But constant Shia rebellions eventually brought about their downfall. In 750 AD, the first House of Islam collapsed. But the erosion of the old empire would also give rise to a new golden age of Islam. Iraq. Today, an Islamic nation at odds with the world. Its capital city of Baghdad, the scene of night bombing attacks during the Gulf War in 1991. But it was here in the 8th century that Islam gave birth to a golden age of learning. It started with the rise of the second great dynasty of Islam, the Abbasids, a family descended from the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, Abbas. At the center of their empire, the Abbasids built a city that became legendary for its beauty, Baghdad.
Baghdad was built as a cosmopolitan city which would serve both as the capital of the empire, and it was a vast empire stretching from Central Asia to the Atlantic. But also, this site would serve as the cultural center.
The Abbasids brought to Baghdad treasures recently acquired in Islam's rapid expansion. Scrolls from the libraries of Alexandria and Pergamum, and texts by the ancient Greeks, Romans, and Persians, which they translated into Arabic.
From the Persian side, a lot of wisdom literature and a lot of political literature, the conduct of kings and so on and so forth. From the Greek side, what mostly interested them was philosophy and natural science.
While Christian Europe was mired in the Dark Ages, Baghdad flowered as the center of Islamic culture. Poetry and calligraphy, architecture and engineering, science and philosophy. Many disciplines flourished, and some new ones were invented.
At the same time that the translation started, there were actual works which were composed, original scientific works which were composed, such as, for example, the famous work on algebra, the invention of the field of algebra.
In this courtly climate, Arab mathematicians developed concepts of decimal fractions, exponents, calculus, and trigonometry. Even today, the number system used by the entire world is Arabic. But it was in the study and practice of medicine that Islam truly achieved distinction. While Christians in Europe were using exorcism and bloodletting to treat the sick, clean hospitals in the Muslim world were practicing advanced surgical techniques, orthopedics, and even treating mental illness. However, by the end of the 11th century, the Islamic East and Christian West were on a collision course.
The actual Crusades were an attempt to colonize the Middle East by Western Europeans.
It began when the Seljuk Turks took Anatolia, cutting off the overland routes used by European pilgrims to visit Christian shrines in the Holy Land. The Catholic Church was quick to respond.
Pope Urban II in 1095 preached the First Crusade, and that was because Jerusalem, he said, was held by the infidels. Well, Jerusalem had been held by the Muslims for hundreds of years, and there had never been that thought before.
Jerusalem, city of Christ's crucifixion, and the site of the great temple of the Jews. But it is also the third holiest city in Islam after Mecca and Medina. In Islamic tradition, Muhammad, during one of his revelations, was spirited from Mecca to Jerusalem on the creature called Buraq. Where the Dome of the Rock now stands, Muhammad ascended to heaven. Other than the revelation of the Quran, it is the only miracle claimed by Muhammad.
He was given at that point the kind of beatific vision where he saw everything that had happened in the past and everything that was going to happen in the future.
And during this, he encounters Jesus and Moses, and so all of that links him again to Jerusalem, to the biblical tradition.
And of course, when he returned to Mecca, it was as if no time had passed.
But in the year 1099, Christian crusaders finally breached the walls of Jerusalem. That night, 30,000 Muslim defenders of the city were slaughtered, causing the streets to run red with blood. For 200 years, the lands of Islam faced 6 major incursions by European knights. But Islam's greatest threat did not come from the Christian crusaders of the West. It came from the Mongolian horsemen of the East. In 1258, the armies of the warlord Hulagu, grandson of Genghis Khan, swept down out of the Russian steppe to plunder the city of Baghdad. The destruction was unlike anything the Muslims had ever seen before. Leaving cities like Aleppo and Damascus in flames, the Mongols marched on to the shores of Palestine, where in 1260, a Muslim army from Egypt finally stopped them.
That was the high water mark of the Mongols as far as their advance toward the west. But their kingdom remained in Iran for some generations, and then some 40 years later, the Khan became a Muslim.
Still, the newly converted Mongols continued their conquests, taking Islam with them into Afghanistan, China, and India. Soon, the holy city of Mecca was crowded with Mongols and Turks, Uzbeks and Afghans, Mamluks and Moors, all on the sacred pilgrimage said to have been begun by Abraham. It is the last of the 5 pillars of Islam, the journey to Mecca, known as the Hajj.
Hajj is an experience which is very unique. It's a journey to God. You are journeying to God, going to His house.
The trip is required of all Muslims at least once in their lifetime. That is, if they are physically and financially able to go.
The Hajj for me was a big spiritual lift. I experienced something that made me more aware of the serious life that I had accepted, the life to be a Muslim.
2 forms of the pilgrimage exist. The Umrah is the lesser pilgrimage, taken alone or in small groups at any time of the year. The greater pilgrimage, the Hajj, always begins on the 8th day of Dhul-Hijjah, the 12th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. Nearly 2 million Muslims take part. For a week prior to the Hajj, pilgrims flock to Saudi Arabia, eager to join